I sometimes take a little bit of issue with people that say, oh, don't use AI because it takes up electricity. You could make the same argument for a Google search. And people did at the time.
Kalyani, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So tell me what's happening at Cobalt right now, and do it like I'm a 10-year-old child, because you guys are doing AI, financial regulation, very heady stuff. Tell me what's going on.
So Cobalt is basically an AI-powered platform that banks, fintechs, credit unions, folks in financial institutions are using to automate a lot of their critical risk and compliance and legal manual work. And so we basically synchronize with all of the regulations. We process like hundreds of thousands of documents all at once and just really cut out a lot of the kind of grunt work around document processing and the stuff that nobody really wants to do anymore.
No, documents are like my least favorite thing in the world. Tell me about what was the status quo like before Cobalt came along in AI. What was the old way of doing things?
Yeah, the old way of doing things, and honestly, in a lot of ways, still the current way of doing things, is really just a world of paper pushing, where there are people who, in the world of risk and compliance, there's the paper pushing aspect of the job, and then there's the like really critical, like strategic aspect of the job. And the paper pushing is just growing and growing. And what it means in real life is that people are sitting down and imagine reading through like a 1,000-page document and trying to identify where any of the potential issues or risks are, and then filling out like a 600-question spreadsheet, identifying where all the things you need to look for are. Like that kind of work is something that AI can just so powerfully, like completely accelerate. And then you can just spend your time really focusing on like, what did AI find? And then how can I actually use my like human expertise to like act on that information?
Very cool. And tell me like the kinds of customers, because you have some very big customers, the kind of customers who work with you and kind of how that all, the partnership goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with kind of fintechs and financial institutions of kind of all sizes. So maybe a fun fintech that a lot of folks might have heard of is Bilt Rewards, the credit card where you get points on rent. So they were one of our like earliest partners, and they actually now use Cobalt to actually automate a lot of this work behind the scenes.
That's so cool. How did you get into this? Because, getting into the world of finance and regulatory stuff is very wonky and very specific.
Yes.
And I know you've never worked in finance, really. How did this come to be?
Yes, it was a bit of a topsy-turvy way to get there, I'd say. So my personal background is I was an engineer. I studied computer science at Stanford, and I was an AI researcher there for a number of years and throughout grad school. And my research was actually on, like, how do you use AI? At the time, they were like, there was no ChatGPT. It was like, how do you use these transformer models to actually, conduct really efficient work on highly sensitive data? So we were working with like government data, financial, healthcare data. And then around the same time, I had a brief stint at Apple Pay where I was actually on their fraud team. So that was me kind of touching financial services. I was helping, how do we automate, checking whether somebody's on a terrorism watch list so they can't use Apple Pay. Some of these like really big problems. And then around the same time, one of my very close friends from Stanford, Ashi, who's my co-founder and CTO, she was also working at a fintech, a firm, where she was building a lot of their like scalable infrastructure as an amazing engineer. And so we kind of teamed up, and we just realized that this world that we came from was just, it was unfathomable how ridiculously archaic a lot of these things were being done. And that was just in the world of fintech. And now we work with some of these larger banks that are really using technology that's like over 25 years old, and it's just so like ripe for disruption.
So cool. I saw in another interview that you did that you and your co-founder were talking about starting a new company.
Yeah.
And you applied to Y Combinator, and you got in, and you both quit your jobs, but you didn't really know what your company was going to do.
Yeah.
That sounds very terrifying to me, but obviously not to you. Tell me, how you got into Y Combinator without having like a clear, I guess, mission, and what it's like to kind of take that leap when you have like, you're working at Apple, very good job. She's at a firm, hot startup, fintech, billion-dollar company, and just to make that plunge without really knowing where you're going.
Yeah, totally. I think that kind of is the ethos behind why she and I get along together so well, because we're both the type of person that got excited by that. So the context is I was never kind of completely satisfied working as a software engineer and kind of working at, I guess, a regular job. I think I would get bored really easily, and I always knew that I wanted to do a little bit of everyone's job, and that's the only way that my mind feels like it's reaching its fullest potential. And so I'd left Apple, and I was kind of an early engineer at this company called Genesis, which is a healthcare company that uses AI So not in financial services, but faced a lot of the similar problems that I see in my world today. And so Ashi and I both just knew that we wanted to take the plunge. And so we decided to apply to Y Combinator. We didn't have an idea per se, but you have to apply with an idea these days. So we spent a couple months just after work every single day. We would like make random side projects and brainstorm and talk to people. And then we eventually were accepted under the almost agreement that we were still trying to figure out what we wanted to work on.
Wow. So you got past that, I don't have an idea. And give me an example of some of the ideas you were thinking of that didn't make the...
Yeah, all over the place. Like all the way from, we were working on initially like this AI security idea, which is a little bit tangential to what we're doing now. But maybe the most out of there one, which was the primary one that we applied to Y Combinator with, was we were building what I would call almost like a Substack, but for authors that are writing like long form novels. Okay. It's like how can you actually almost like a Netflix for books, we were calling it, like where authors could actually release chapter by chapter. You could subscribe to them. Everybody would get the chapter drop on Friday.
A serialized model. Okay.
Exactly. And so we talked to a lot of folks that were old in the serial fiction world, and we got some authors involved. And we actually built the product, and it was a very humbling journey understanding like the pros and cons of that business model. Actually, around the same time, Substack had tried to do the same thing, and we both ended up shutting that down. At the same time, I think everybody realized like the pitfalls with that business model.
Let's go back to so you studied AI at Stanford, but you said it's interesting because I feel like when ChatGPT came around, it was like an inflection point. Like it suddenly everyone was talking about AI. You were doing it before it was like the hottest thing going on, right? Mm-hmm. What got you interested in it beforehand, before like the generative AI, the chatbots, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's funny that you say that it was this inflection boom. I think from a consumer standpoint, that's totally sure. But
zeitgeist and media-wise.
But we were all, like everybody who doesn't realize they were using it has been using it for like over a decade now, you know. But I think in terms of what brought me excitement to it, I mean, I was, in my freshman year at Stanford, and even before that, I think I've always just been super excited by technology. Like my parents are both scientists, and like they're very like innovative people, and so I've always been interested in like the new thing and like understanding how things are going to change. And so around that time, around like the 2016, 2017 era was another big, almost like improvement in a lot of like AI models and a lot of the research going on. And so you could do crazy things then. And I was super excited by it. Like you could start manipulating images way, way worse than you can today. But all that stuff was starting to really be possible. And so I just like, even in high school, I was doing research on that stuff, like doing little projects, like applying to Stanford with that stuff. And so I was always just super intrigued by it.
Our high school experiences were very different. I wanted to go back to starting Cobalt, because you said you applied to Y Combinator with a promise that you'd figure out an idea eventually. Yeah. How did you land on Cobalt?
Yeah, this was a very, very long process. So it was not within the confined 3 months of Y Combinator. We applied to YC with the serial fiction idea, actually. Okay. That was what our interview was about. And that's what our partners talked to us about. And they were like, hey, we think you're probably going to change your idea, but we think you're smart and you're just going to figure it out. Okay. So that was kind of the premise there. And so then we kind of realized that for a lot of reasons, that idea had flaws, and we wanted to work on something that we felt more conviction in. And so we kind of thought about, okay, what were problems that we see in our jobs, in our daily life? Like, how can we have like empathy for a problem we want to solve? And so at my previous company, we had some issues trying to use AI models on really sensitive healthcare data. And so we thought, okay, there must be something we can do to unlock the ability to use like OpenAI or other kind of foundational models on like sensitive data. So we built a product to help companies with that. And we worked on that for 3 months during Y Combinator. Like we got revenue, we raised a seed round off a bit. And then after all of that was kind of done, we again realized that we had built a product without doing the proper like diligence and like really understanding deeply that it was a problem people really needed us to solve. So then we spent another almost 4 to 6 months all the way going back to the drawing board. We scrapped everything. Revenue went back to zero. We told all of our investors that we were pivoting. Okay. And Ashi and I both spent almost 6 months from almost 6 months all the way until the spring, really just talking to folks and digging deeper and deeper and deeper into what were the tinges of interest in our initial idea and how can we pull the thread on what people actually needed. So for the initial idea, we had a couple fintech companies that we had been talking to who told us, hey, this is kind of useful, but we have bigger fish to fry. And I'd say, hey, will you talk to me about what are the real problems you're facing? Just give me 20 minutes of your time. Let me ask you anything. Pick your brain. And people were nice enough to say yes. And so after maybe 1,000 of those conversations, almost like a game of hot and cold, this thing emerged where we realized like this fundamental problem that was foundational to everyone we were talking to. And then by the time, all these things came together, we were like, okay, we have this idea. Everybody has the same problem. And we think there's like one solution that can solve it for everyone. We're like, that's a business.
I love that. It seems like a myth that people, like founders have like a lightning bolt idea, or they think of something and it
Yes.
happens.
No, I was looking for the lightning bolt.
Reporters, you were storm chasing.
Literally.
Lightning bolt, thousands of...
Yeah, 10 hours a day just talking to people and slowly iterating the idea until all of a sudden people stopped asking like, when is this conversation done? And they started asking, how much does it cost? And I was like, oh, why do you even care how much it costs? That means there's something there,
Wow. Tell me about the mindset required to build a product, get investors, and then just scrap it and go back to the drawing board and look for something else.
Yes, I think it was a very scary time because we had a little bit, there were people that somewhat believed in what we were building. I had been able to convince investors that this was something worth investing in. So it was very scary initially to just say, hey, by the way, this thing that I told you with like full passion last week, I believed, like I don't believe this anymore. But I think that's also the magic of how smart like our investors were, and even the like Y Combinator community. If something is eventually not going to be the right thing to do, then there's no point in delaying the inevitable. So we just said, hey, like it's a tough call because we were excited about this, but I just know that if I don't say this now, we're going to burn a year's worth of company money and realize it then. So we might as well cut our losses and like do something that we know can be like a home run. And it was very scary, but basically all of our investors said like, we're actually really happy you do this. Even in Y Combinator, the majority of the companies I know from my cohort have pivoted, and it's just a part of the process.
Yeah. If it's like if you're lost and you find out you're walking the wrong direction, like you want to turn around as fast as you can.
Exactly.
The further you go, the more pain it's going to be.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the business model and how does Cobalt make money?
Yeah, so Cobalt makes money because banks, fintechs, and credit unions pay for licenses to use the platform. Okay. So it's like a SaaS platform that's cloud-based, and underneath the hood is like all of our AI infrastructure. But at the end of the day, it's as simple as, if you're if you work on the risk and compliance team at a bank that's working with Cobalt, you start your day, you log into Cobalt, and you just start doing your work in the platform. And so we have annual and multi-year contracts. Okay. It's super simple.
How much money have you raised?
So we had raised, as part of our seed round with this kind of AI security idea I mentioned, we'd raised about $1.6 million. Okay. And then actually during this summer, we closed our Series A. So we raised an additional $11 million. So in total, 12.6.
What is your one tip for fundraising effectively?
My one tip is believe what you're saying. I think when we were fundraising for the first idea that I mentioned we pivoted from, we were able to fundraise, but the questions that people were asking me to poke holes in the idea, I almost realized that I had to bullshit just a little bit to figure out how to wrap my head around it and justify the fact that that wasn't going to be a problem. And so I think we could have realized that it was a bad idea even earlier if I had listened to my gut and said, hey, I don't even completely believe what I'm saying. And like, this is going to be a problem we face. And so now this time when we fundraise, this time when we're talking to investors, I knew that I actually believed the answers to the questions that we're asking. And I believed in how we were going to overcome a lot of the like obvious ways you can poke holes in the problem. And I think the conviction just kind of follows through. It's like you build a good company and you actually think it's going to work, then people can be convinced that it also will too.
I love that. I never heard that before. That's really cool. Talk to me about how you guys got started at first. Talk to me how you guys started, because you mentioned your AI, it's ingesting super complex information, documents. And if it makes a mistake, you could be letting criminals get off the hook. You could be helping people finance bad things.
Totally.
Like the starting point of a company always blows my mind. Like, how did you get started? Because this is complex and high stakes.
Yeah, totally. Which I think is also why I like the space, because I like the high stakes environment. I kind of thrive under pressure, and I like when things feel really serious and that it's very important to do things right. I think we relied a lot on some of our early partners that really just said, hey, we know we're using a product that, we're one of your early customers and partners. We're going to use it every day. We're going to know in the early days we can't rely on it, and we're going to give you very frank feedback and help you make it better. I think we would be nothing without those initial partners actually telling us where the product was bad. Okay. We said, tell me what's bad and I will make it better. And then over time, as the last 2 years have gone by, we've come to a place where, when banks are benchmarking Cobalt, or even when some regulators are testing the platform, we are the most accurate AI tool in the market for this. Like they compare us against other AI tools. They compare us against even some human reviewers that are just getting bored reviewing this 100,000 page document. And we've come out on top almost every single time. And the reason why is because I think we invested a lot of engineering effort into making it like transparent, citable, doing a lot of work in like showing the explainability around where we're getting our results from. Like I think without any of that, you can't get a bank to trust you because it's too important to mess up.
That's so cool. Did you, like the software, does it run on a bigger LLM? Does it run on like a Gemini or run on an OpenAI system, or did you how does that work?
Yes, we did not train our own foundational models, didn't have the cash for that. So under the hood, we're using a couple of different foundation models. Like some of our document processing is powered by Anthropic's Claude and OpenAI's GPT model. Those alone wouldn't be able to get us to what we needed to do. So then there's a lot of kind of custom infrastructure that our engineering team has built in place to kind of ensure the end-to-end workflow and most importantly, make sure that it is actually accurate and works.
Yeah. What is the secret sauce for Cobalt? Like, again, because, a bank could just maybe go right to the LLMs and do it, instead to kind of bypass you. How do you add value? Like, what does your engineering and software add value to those, multi-billion-dollar LLMs that are already out there?
Yeah, totally. And I think this goes down to like what is an AI product at the end of the day? Because if your product is just something where you upload something and you get results in, that's the same work style as an LLM that eventually one day will just get better and better and overcome its pitfalls. Like that's not enough to build a sustainable business. And so for us, Cobalt is more than just the AI tool. It's an AI-enabled like complete platform where, for example, if we take an example of a workflow that we support, which is kind of due diligence on third parties like vendors or fintech partners, et cetera, you can upload some of that due diligence documentation into an LLM and get some results. But Cobalt is going to do all of your risk assessments. It's going to reach out, communicate with the right people using our AI agents. It's going to do other research online, pull all of that back in. It's going to generate your final reporting, and it's going to send those reports to the right people and manage all the approvals. So it's not just this one-off thing, but it's actually like a ecosystem of AI agents that are orchestrated to do the full work. So that's where like the product comes in. I honestly think though, the secret sauce to working in financial services, having the best and most accurate product is maybe only 50% of the way there. I think like currency here is honestly trust. And so I think our secret sauce is really the fact that the banks and fintechs and credit unions we work with like very publicly trust us. There's regulators that are piloting us. And I think once a lot of those building blocks are in place, then you just know that, hey, if I need to look for a tool in this space, am I going to look for one that I have no sense of their references or how well it's working? Or am I going to look for one that is currently being battle tested by like the institutions with like the highest, the highest quality that they need?
How did you build that trust? And also how did you kind of make relationships or connections inside that world? Because you're a new company, you're a young founder, obviously you're working with older companies with maybe older people. Like how did you get in the door and then how did you win that trust?
Yes, I would say the absolute hardest part about any of this was initially getting in the door. And to some extent, I'm still knocking on doors like every single day. Part of it is really just relentless, outbound, hitting up people, going to places. I would sneak into conferences and say, we don't even have the cash for a badge right now. I would stand outside, be like, will you talk to me for 10 minutes? Wow, okay. Let me pitch you my idea. So I
love that grit.
Yeah, so we did some crazy things. And now we're like, hey, I'm speaking at this conference, but you don't need any of that, to be honest. Like you just need to like show up like 1,000 times over. And then if you show up 1,000 times, 10% of those times will lead to something. And then you have 100 opportunities to do something interesting. So it really was just like knocking on doors. I heard so many no's, but then you hear one or two yeses, that person takes a chance on you, they give you feedback, they introduce you to someone else they know, and then it just like blossoms from there.
I love how your first client was Bilt, because we know Encore Jane very well, the founder, and he's a former under 30 and now a Forbes billionaire. So I love the under 30 connection. That's really cool.
That's great. So they were not our first, they were one of the earliest ones, but they were one of our like first 5 clients. So they've been amazing and they took a big chance on us. Like they've given us so much feedback. And then even beyond that, I think cracking into fintechs was one step. And then going from that to getting a bank to want to use you is a completely other challenge in and of its own. So that kind of got us in the door. And then our first bank that took a chance on us and vouched for us for other banks. Like we couldn't have done any of it without their like testimonials and trust.
I love that. Obviously, you're an AI expert. You studied computer science at Stanford for AI. Most people haven't. What advice do you have for a founder or CEO that is not technically trained, but they know that they have to have an important AI component in their business?
Totally. I actually would flip my advice here because I think I see a lot of people who are trying to say, hey, my goal is to bring in AI somehow. When I think bringing in AI for the sake of AI eventually just looks a little bit sloppy in a product because you can just see that it didn't need to be there. You just added this random chatbot. You're like, oh, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I'm sure all of us have had that experience. Yes. And it's like, okay, great, you added this chatbot, but like, I'm not even using it because I need to do this thing. And so I think the real way that we've realized even people who are or aren't technical can use AI properly is stop just like aggressively looking to slap in AI everywhere and actually figure out like what are the problems that we need to solve. And some strong fraction of them can probably be solved very well by AI. Some of them may or may not be able to, but I think starting from the need is how, even without the technical background, you can make sure that it doesn't look like something you just threw in. So that'd be my number one thing. And then the other thing is just like hire people who really know their stuff. I think there's also a lot of AI companies I see who don't have any expertise in-house. And then you can also see that things work and work and work. And then the second you hit a huge amount of data or any kind of like scaling issue or quality issue, you're just stuck there. And the only way you can get unstuck is if you actually like know the technical chops. And if you don't know it, then bring in someone who does.
Gotcha. What's the one piece of business philosophy that you live by and how has it made a difference?
I think the one piece of business philosophy is really just to be delusionally optimistic. Because there were times like when we kind of shut down that first idea and we were in that 6 month of pivot hell, as they call it. We had literally nothing. Like Ashi and I had nothing but each other and literally nothing except this belief that like, hey, I'm not going to go down without a fight. We're going to make something happen here. Even though at that point we had nothing all over again. And so I think there's like, successes, we randomly get things happen to us. Randomly things can get taken away. Like you can't count on anything, but I think your just ability to say like, I'm going to succeed because I'm going to force it to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And I want to talk one more thing about AI and energy. Obviously, AI, everyone's talking about how everyone's building power plants, Meta's building nuclear power plants to power all this AI infrastructure. The amount of electricity is insane. How do you think about sustainability when you're building your company?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. I'm seeing it pop up in a lot of places. I think the right way to think of it is like twofold. On the first piece, it's weighing the total pros and cons of doing something and figuring out like what is the bigger picture here we're trying to solve. So for example, automating anything is going to take electricity, but are there like second and third order consequences that ultimately make everything more productive and save people's time, save people's energy, like save more energy in the long run? I think I sometimes take a little bit of issue with people that say, oh, don't use AI because it takes up electricity. You could make the same argument for a Google search. And people did at the time, or you could make the same argument for using any computer at all. So like things that progress innovation are going to take energy. And I think the way to do it is to invest very heavily in finding ways to make it efficient, but not to put the burden on necessarily the consumer to act against their best interests when this is something that is like bringing a lot of abundance. So that's how I think about it. I think I saw the statistic that people like doing a single ChatGPT search consumes significantly less energy than like eating a cheeseburger. So I think like none of us are going to be perfect. So you just have to choose like, where am I going to do things that I decide, weigh those pros and cons properly, because you can't balance everything perfectly. If you do, then we would all be hypocrites.
Well, Kalyani, that was great. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is great.